Hello, my friends. Day 5 of the battle against the Yellow Jackets. I'll tell you more about that at tonight's Hangout, which will be at 9 p.m. Eastern. That's right, 9 p.m. starting late because I'm going to be doing an appearance on Stephanie Rule's show, or a panel that tapes on Thursday for Friday night airing if you want to watch it. But 9 p.m. for tonight's Hangout. Welcome to another episode of my Gen Zeries series, where I talk to a young person who's really smart and impressive about their life and their views on things. Today on the Gen Zeries, I'll be featuring young Dasia Taylor, who I met out in Iowa City, a brilliant young black woman who is an entrepreneur, a scientist, and a really smart, mature woman who I was absolutely blown away with. Her achievements, inventions have gotten her on CNN, on Ellen, on Dr. Oz back when he was still legitimate. She's real impressive. I think you're going to love Dasia the way I did, and that conversation begins at 22 minutes into today's podcast. If you want to jump ahead and skip the news, but you don't today, especially because I have so many great audio clips from Wednesday. Oh man, it was a potpourri of exciting stuff coming out, especially of Washington, D.C. yesterday. Let's start with the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, who is one of the smartest guys in all of government and politics, in my opinion. Certainly a tough guy to argue with. I always love when he goes on Fox News or he takes on these fools that are so much less prepared and intelligent than he is. Exactly the case at yesterday's House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee hearing, where the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg warned of a potential government shutdown, about how that would set back progress that the department has made on air travel. Also, committee members sought information from the Secretary of Transportation about the U.S. DOT's infrastructure funding and current projects, and took the opportunity to ask him how a potential government shutdown would affect their departments. But it was the poorly prepared political attacks that were the most entertaining, and this moment went absolutely viral yesterday when Republican Representative Doug LaMalva of California's 1st District got absolutely embarrassed by the Secretary of Transportation. Listen to this.
I don't know the percentage of atmospheric gases.
You don't know the percent of the atmosphere.
What I can tell you is that climate change is real. We got to do something about it.
Yeah, this one's called autumn, sir. So
I'm sorry?
This one's called autumn right now, so yeah.
I'm sorry, I couldn't make out what you said, sir.
This climate change right now is called autumn, yes.
Yeah, that's the seasons changing, which respectively is not the same thing as the climate changing. And as somebody who is hoping to retire in the 2050s and who has kids who will be old enough to ask me as they're getting to their 30s whether we did enough to deal with climate change or whether we just did what was convenient, I take that really seriously.
Reclaiming my time. Thank you, Mrs. Secretary. The trillions and trillions we're going to cost our kids to chase a tiny percentage of CO2 will bankrupt all of us, and bankrupt our economy, and ship it to China for all the other reasons. So I yield back, Mr.
Gentleman's time has expired.
It's an absolutely idiotic argument that he's making for so many reasons and in so many ways. The damage that climate is causing is going to cost trillions more than whatever we could possibly arguably lose by investing in a future of renewable energy. Also, if we don't, China will, regardless of how much they're polluting, they're still going to sell EVs regardless of their carbon footprint or how much pollution they put out, simply because they're better cars. The future is EVs. This is no argument about it. By the way, Norway is like 80% of new cars are electric vehicles. We're around 5%, but once you get past that threshold, it really starts to ramp up when it comes to automobiles. And it's just a preposterous statement. The way that Buttigieg baited him and made him say what he was trying to say about autumn was just so pitch perfect. But this next point is far better. I've been trying to make this argument, make people understand this for years, ever since I found out that we were subsidizing the oil and gas industry to the tune of like $80 billion a year was a figure I read at one point several years ago. And what does that do? Well, all kinds of things. It helps them do the research, it helps them do the actual work, the actual drilling, and it brings down, most importantly, the cost for a gallon of gas at the pump. The United States government, the taxpayer, pays so much to those industries so that the cost of gas per gallon is cheaper. They don't do it that way in Europe, which is why people drive smaller cars. It's much more of a free market that way. The government doesn't subsidize their energy. Energy has a truer actual cost on the market, not hard to understand. I think we should pick winners. I think the people vote for their government. The government then picks the industries that they want to invest in. You have a whole bunch of different companies that bid for government contracts. Somebody gets it in the fairest possible way. And the future is clean, renewable energy automobiles that we sell to the rest of the world, made here in America. It's not a tough argument. It shouldn't be a controversial argument. One could make it as a very conservative argument, but they don't want to hear it because they want to be beholden to the oil and gas industry, who donates so much to each of their campaigns, helps them keep office and stay in power, and it becomes this bullshit culture war thing about supporting oil and gas, and somehow EVs are for liberal pussies. It's preposterous, and the Secretary of Transportation handles it perfectly while being questioned and accused in a very hostile way by a guy who supported the insurrection, who supports the impeachment, an extremist in the House Republican Party, and the chairman of this committee. It's Scott Perry this time getting served up some very humble pie by the brilliant Secretary Pete.
These are not market forces. This is the government funding the destruction of our own automotive industry. And I hope you know that approximately 2/3 of EV owners make over $100,000 a year. My bosses don't make that. I don't know if you can justify or how you justify forcing my constituents to pay for EVs and EV infrastructure for coastal elites and wealthy people, but somehow you do.
Well, I need to point out that wealthy people were specifically excluded from the Inflation Reduction Act.
Well, I just gave you the number. Do you dispute that 2/3 of EV owners are owned by people over 100,000 that make over 100,000? Did you dispute that?
Yeah, the first EVs, of course, were.
Do you dispute that?
No, but that number's going down.
Those are the facts. It doesn't matter if they're going down now. The folks that I represent can't afford them today, sir.
Why were you against cutting their costs?
All these factors. I'm not against cutting their costs. The market should do it. But you want the government, you want my taxpayers to pay to cut the cost, which isn't cutting the cost. It's subsidizing the cost.
Congressman, if you were of the view that there should be no subsidy to propulsion vehicles, then are you against oil and gas subsidies?
Mean that for every EV sold, sir, at a loss, that the cost of the, as my colleague on the other side, the gas-guzzling pickup truck is higher now to pay for the loss as you kill your administration, and you in particular kill the auto industry. And I'll remind you, in 2008, after the financial crisis, the federal government bailed out this industry. So while you're here today, will you commit and will you pledge to oppose any effort to bail out the auto industry after you force it into bankruptcy again? Will you do that today, sir?
Congressman, I got started in politics when
I guess the answer is no.
Indiana factory was at risk of being shut down because an elected official in my state tried to block the administration from saving Chrysler. I got involved and stood with the UAW to save those jobs, and I'll always be with auto jobs being preserved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, would you like to finish your statement?
Sure, thank you, and I'll try to be as concise as I can. There are some people who I suppose believe there should be no subsidies for anything involving transportation. And I assume in the spirit of philosophical consistency, they would be against subsidizing oil and gas, as well as being against subsidizing Americans being able to afford an EV. There are others who believe that we should force Americans to be in the technology of the past forever. And then there's this administration, which recognizes that the world is moving to EVs, with or without us. And those EVs are either going to be made by Chinese workers or they're going to be made by American workers. And we respect the UAW standing up at the dawn of a new chapter in the automotive industry that created my hometown to make sure that those are not just American jobs, but good-paying American jobs.
And scene.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, he nails it right there. I thought that was so important, so good, and I hope more people will watch that clip and it gets shared widely, because that is the stuff, folks. Not that hard to understand. Make the argument. Be consistent philosophically. Well, speaking of inconsistency and great clips that I want to share with you. Yesterday, an ad dropped, an anti-Ted Cruz PAC made this ad to make fun of Ted Cruz, and the audio isn't quite as good as the video, but I think I decided that it does translate, and I'm going to share it with you right now. It's so good. Take a listen.
Some of y'all know I do every week a podcast. I do a podcast every week. I do a podcast 3 days a week. I do a podcast. Last year I launched a podcast. 2 years ago I launched a podcast. 3 years ago I launched a podcast. I do a podcast, my last podcast. Today's podcast on the podcast on my podcast.
Back to Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation hearing.
You know, a couple of years ago I was doing my weekly podcast. My podcast.
If you're a grifter, you got to grift.
LoseCruise.com.
Podcast.
Oh, I love that final podcast. That makes me laugh very, very, very hard.
Podcast.
All right. Well, this ad is just as effective and not very funny at all, but I think really, really important, and I would love to see more of this. Here is the incumbent governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear. He is a Democrat, just released one of the most powerful ads, I think, of the election cycle, and is succinctly, I think, displays the utter depravity of Andy Beshear's Republican opponent's position on abortion. Here it is. Young woman sitting, speaking to camera, and this is it.
I was raped by my stepfather after years of sexual abuse. I was 12. Anyone who believes there should be no exceptions for rape and incest could never understand what it's like to stand in my shoes. This is to you, Daniel Cameron. To tell a 12-year-old girl she must have the baby of her stepfather who raped her is unthinkable. I'm speaking out because women and girls need to have options. Daniel Cameron would give us none.
How about the power of that ad? I don't think you can do much better than that. Daniel Cameron, of course, is against abortion, even in cases of rape and incest, apparently. And the incumbent governor, Andy Beshear, tweeted along the video, Hadley's story is important. Under Kentucky's current law, which Daniel Cameron supports and defended to the Supreme Court, women and girls like her would have no options. Boom. Powerful ad. Play it everywhere. All right. Here's another great piece of audio and really important piece of news. What the Pennsylvania legislature did yesterday, putting forth policies that would actually make it easier for people to vote with automatic voter registration. He was on CNN yesterday. They asked him to respond to that cretin Stephen Miller. And first of all, he just makes fun of Stephen Miller, which the anchor Poppy Harlow didn't much take a liking to. But then he gave what I thought was a really great, thoughtful, articulate answer as to why this policy matters and means such a big deal to the health of our democracy. Here is the great governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, on CNN yesterday.
Automatically register eligible residents to vote when they get a new state-issued ID or driver's license. Now, 23 other states plus Washington, D.C. have some form of automatic voter registration, but few of them are likely to play as pivotal a role in the next presidential election as Pennsylvania.
You mentioned what the DMV or what checks there are, right, from the DMV, et cetera. I just was wondering if you could please respond directly to Stephen Miller, former Donald Trump aide, who tweeted this. I can promise you there will be no citizenship verification. Just want to give you a chance to respond directly to that.
Yeah. Look, I'm not going to respond to Stephen Miller. That guy's a dope who can't tell the truth.
Yeah, I'm not asking you about Stephen Miller, Governor, but just about what he raises, because I think he raises a question others may raise. So just to the substance of what he said.
Right. Right. Well, he doesn't raise any substance. Here is the actual substance. When you go to get a driver's license, when you go to renew your driver's license, you have to bring identifying documents in order to be able to secure that driver's license. The same documents that are required in order to be able to register to vote. We're relying on a system that already has safeguards built into it to allow someone to be automatically registered to vote. Listen, Poppy, I went to court more than 40 times to defeat people like Stephen Miller and others who tried to thwart the will of the people here in Pennsylvania, who made up all kinds of ridiculous claims after the 2020 election. And I won every single time in court and defended the will of the people here in Pennsylvania, defended the right to vote. And here in Pennsylvania, we value our freedom, we value our democracy, and voting is central to that. And now it's easier for eligible voters to have their voices heard here in the country.
All right. Commonwealth. I think I cut him off. Governor Josh Shapiro yesterday on CNN with a very, very clear, articulate, and passionate answer and actual policy to create healthier, better, more democracy. Love that. Like to see that in more states. Several states already have that, but hopefully we're going to see more of that across the country. Of course, Republicans don't want people voting because they don't have any policy agenda other than culture war, bumper stickers and slogans to divide people. Don't actually want or support using government to make our lives better or to protect us. So the more people that vote, the better, because most people really don't support their extremist agenda across the country, or they're misled by it. So I don't know. I'll shut up. I think that's great. Sorry for ranting on and on, but I really love that Governor Josh Shapiro and what he's doing there and what he said.
You had a good relationship with former President Trump, then President, and his administration. You know, there's several investigations right now with President Biden and his son Hunter, the money he took in from a company in Ukraine and from China, and whether that had an impact either directly to President Biden or on his decisions that he made. In the Trump administration, you had a really close relationship with the president's senior advisor and son-in-law, Jared Kushner. After he left, Saudi fund made reportedly a $2 billion investment in Jared's new fund he was launching and managing. Do you think that sends the wrong message, even if there wasn't a tit for tat, I'll give you this and you get that?
We look to opportunities and investment. We have investment, a lot of investment around the globe with a lot of peoples and with economical opportunity.
So if Trump becomes president again, you'll leave the $2 billion with Jared Kushner?
It's a commitment that PIF have, and when PIF have commitment with any investor around the globe, keep it.
Would it affect your decisions with a new Trump administration with that sitting there?
Well, Saudi Arabia is so big, so I'm quite sure mostly any person around the world, directly or indirectly, you have something to do with Saudi Arabia. So if that can affect President Trump decision, if he become a president, that means that it can affect every president in the world and every person in the world decision, because directly or indirectly, he have some sort of interest or something to do with Saudi Arabia.
Wow. Just wow. What a major, major admission. Just simply that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, confirmed a $2 billion investment from the country's sovereign wealth fund into Jared Kushner's firm. Confirmed it. If there's any question whether Jared Kushner got money from the Saudis, there isn't anymore. All these questions around the Hunter Biden getting money paid from China or other countries, and people really don't know a lot about that, where it's come from, why he got the money, if he got the money, who got the money. Well, in the case of Jared Kushner, we just heard from the Saudi Crown Prince himself, yeah, we gave him $2 billion. And no, that shouldn't influence anything about the Trump administration. $2 billion doesn't influence people. I think it does. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it influences everything when you give a person, the president's son-in-law, $2 billion. And what it means is he sold America out, and he will continue to, selling us piece by piece to the highest bidder, including one of the worst human rights violators and people leading any country anywhere in the planet, Mohammed bin Salman. Ugh. All right. Well, I was going to play some clips of the Attorney General getting grilled by House Republicans yesterday. It got really ugly, but I ran out of time to grab them, and they were so painful to watch anyway. My love is not lost for the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, but the questions were so unfair, and he was treated so unfairly that I just couldn't bear it. Really cringe. So I'm going to skip off those. Here is just a few other stories before I get to my excellent, great young guest. The Senate now is poised to promote 3 generals steering around a blockade by Tommy Tuberville. So that's a developing story. Americans will once again be able to receive free COVID tests by mail ahead of a possible winter surge. Thank you to the Biden administration. Fed The Fed is keeping interest rates on hold, which I think is good news. Ray Epps' lawyer is torching Fox News and Tucker Carlson over lies about their client who's suing the network. He's just pled guilty, Ray Epps, in a misdemeanor charge related to the January 6th Capitol riot on Wednesday. Former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson has accused serial sexual assaulter Rudy Giuliani of groping allegations on January 6th. She writes about it in her new book. It's pretty graphic and pretty disgusting. Read about that and look forward to hearing her talk about it. All Rudy Giuliani had to do was just give speeches and pass quietly into history, and he might have had some kind of a decent legacy, even though those of us who were living in New York City while he was mayor before 9/11 already really didn't like the guy because he was a super racist, awful creep. But we were distracted, I think, so much by all of his crimes and policies and his affiliation with Trump that we don't see how many women he's actually sexually assaulted and harassed. Dude has been accused by so many women. His ex-wives hate him. His daughter hates him. He's so despicable for so many reasons. But above all, I hope that he is thought of and remembered as a first-rate sexually assaulting criminal. But we'll see how history remembers this creep, who apparently doesn't pay his lawyers either. They're suing him for back legal fees. Ironic, isn't it? And that is all of the news I've got for you on today's episode of Stand Up, which I do Monday through Thursday, this news segment. Thank you to everybody who reached out and said how much they appreciate it after I talked about that on yesterday's show. Also, it was really exciting to meet another listener that I've been listening to the show for a long time. Yesterday, I got together with Zach, who was passing through my area, and it was really cool to finally hook up with him. I've been meeting so many listeners over the past few weeks, and it's always so rewarding to meet you guys and get out and get to know you a little bit the way you've gotten to know me and support me over all these years. It's just such a wonderful community of really brilliant, thoughtful, hilarious, kind, generous folks. Thank you, Zach, for coming out and for buying me lunch. Very, very cool. If you're coming through my area or if I'm coming to yours, I always love meeting listeners, especially if you've been listening for a long time or a short time, whatever. I always love meeting folks and making new friends. So thank you to Zach, to Lincoln and Casey, who came out in Iowa City and I hung out with, to my friend Hap, who I finally got to meet in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago. I always love to hang out with you guys and look forward to meeting more of you in the future. All right, well, speaking of listeners, Mark Nolte, my friend out in Iowa City, introduced me to so many awesome people while I was out there that I got to sit down and tape interviews with, including today's guest, who is part of my Gen Zeries, where I talk to young people about their lives, their views on where we're at in America and the world. And Dasia Taylor is one of the most impressive young people I've ever met in my life. We had a great conversation. She's a student at the University of Iowa, an entrepreneur, an advocate for STEM. She invented Sutures that started as the subject of a science fair project, ended up winning top prizes at state and national competitions. She was a USA Today Women of the Year honoree. She's been on The Ellen Show. She was on Dr. Oz. She just turned 20 years old and celebrated her birthday at the Iowa Children's Museum, where she also hosted an event for families and kids, which she would like to take on the road called Dasia Day. I'm so excited to introduce to you Dasia Taylor. You can find out more about her in the show notes if you want to reach out to her, contact her, hire her, whatever. Here we go. Right now, for the first time ever, Gen Zeries, I introduce to you Dasia Taylor. All right, Dasia Taylor, welcome to Stand Up. I'm so excited to talk to you because everybody's talking about you and saying I have to talk to you. So welcome.
Cheers. Thank you.
This is my Gen Z series. Nice. So you're about what age?
I'm 20 now.
20. That puts you firmly in Gen Z, I think.
I think it does. Actually, I'm not on the cusp of anything. I think I'm like firmly Gen Z.
You don't have to be confused. Like some of us are on the cusp of this or that, but you don't have to be confused.
Not at all.
Just a couple of general questions about that, about like your generation and the way that you view what you guys have dealt with and what you're experiencing and what you're seeing. It's different than your parents. It's different than my experience. And I want to know, kind of, it's your narrative, it's your point of view, but how do you feel about like your generation, and I'll say specifically of Americans, and the way they are, and it's very general, however you want to talk about.
I think like Gen Z Americans are being really pushed into activism in our generation. Like every generation has their section, I guess, of activism and what they are protesting for or against. But I feel like Gen Z is in a constant motion of like fighting for and against things in whether it's government, whether it is like general society. And so we're seeing a lot of like Gen Z change makers come out of this. So people like myself and a lot of people who fight for what they believe in, whether it's climate change, whether it's STEM, etc. And it's been really awesome to experience and to look at and to look up to. And we're really kind of changing the world for the better, we think. So it's been really great, and I enjoy being a part of Gen Z.
That's a really interesting, positive outlook on the activism question. Do you find some people your age, even black folks, are apathetic?
Apathetic?
Yeah, like they don't care about things.
I think that you'll find that in any generation that people just don't care.
But do you I hear what you're saying about people getting almost pushed into trying to be change makers or be activists. I think that's different than my generation. I don't think we had hardly any of that. Granted, I was a white guy growing up with a pretty good life, but I mean, do you meet young people your age that don't really care about stuff?
Yes.
The world around them? You do?
Yes.
And how do you deal with those people? Do you wake up
or
you don't?
No, that's their business.
You're not judging. Okay.
No, not at all. Because I feel like if you want to be a change maker, great. If you just want to make it through life, great. Like both are noble routes. Like there's no one better than the other. But at the end of the day, there's no judgment. No.
I think that I judge.
You do?
Now I do.
Sure.
Not young people my age.
Sure.
I'm more like do something.
Yeah.
Do something. That's always been my brand, like fighting apathy.
Sure.
But I appreciate your mature, non-judgmental thought about it. Like you're doing you, and that's okay. But I just always want people to be involved in something.
Yeah. And I think they, in some way or another, they are involved in something that is important in their lives. But it's not for me to judge what that is. You know what I'm saying?
I don't like you.
I don't. Hey,
I want you to
I don't
judge.
have any space for that to take up in my mind. It's just none of my business.
How come you're so mature? I mean, I knew that just prepping to talk to you. But you really have accomplished some crazy, amazing things already. Why? What made you? How did you become this kid?
So I'm not completely sure. There's no Pythagorean theorem to my life or anything like that. But as far as the things that I've experienced, I grew up in a single parent household with a mother who had me at a very early age. And so a lot of the things that she started learning in her 20s, I was old enough to understand.
Oh, wow. You were learning with her.
I was learning with her. And so I learned a lot of lessons that I would typically be learning right now at 6 or 7.
You became 20 when you were 12.
Kind of, yeah. So I think that plays a really big role in my maturity level. But as far as getting involved in things, my mom was always very was always encouraging me to get involved in different activities. And so I just continued that when I got into junior high and high school, and I really loved it. And I understood that learning happened outside of the classroom too. So I just took all of those as learning opportunities at face value and just worked with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who were you in high school?
Who was I in high school?
Pigeonhole yourself. Stereotype yourself. What kid were you?
I was a kid who never really fit in with any particular group, any particular clique. But at the same time, people knew who I was because I was cool with people.
I love it.
Does that make sense?
It does. You were a butterfly.
Okay. I was kind of a butterfly.
But not being in one flower all the time.
But at the same time, I don't really connect with my peers as well as I connect with adults. So I was super
too.
Yeah, I was super into the teacher community, and so those would be my mentors and people I would go to first, as opposed to people my own age and peers and stuff like that. So that's the person I was.
What were you into? What activities? I mean, obviously science and experimenting, and you were clearly very curious and trying different things, but I'll say they aren't the typical teenager things, which I would argue might be music and sports and I don't know what else, pop culture, or maybe some arts, whatever. Not that I don't know if you weren't into those, but you were experimenting and sciencing and asking adult questions to adult problems, it would seem.
I was. As far as like the actual activities I was participating in high school, they're kind of all across the board. I did this really cool club called Black History Game Show that's like specifically in Iowa. You know, I did science fair and stuff like that. I also was active in the like Colors Club, which was our LGBTQ club in high school, all over the board. I did like student senate and stuff like that, so like student government for generalized. I did a bunch of things.
You were what we would call a nerd.
Oh, 100%.
And when we were younger, it might have been pejorative, but as you get older, you realize the nerds often run the world and are very, very successful.
Yeah.
Tell me about your discovery with Beats and how that became widely known and how you ended up then on Ellen DeGeneres. Like, what the hell? This Iowa girl is like doing all these high-profile media appearances as a result of what?
Yeah, so first of all, I did claim my nerd status very, very early in life.
Like,
so this... Like,
and proudly.
Yes, 100%. Proudly. I was always like smart, but...
You were the kid I cheated off of.
Yes.
Did kids cheat off of you? Did you have a moral... Oh, you don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah,
because like it's not like people never talked to me or anything. Like I talked to people and I was, very casual. I could play both sides, right? But I don't know. They would never like tell me that they were cheating off of me. I don't know.
That's how we did it.
Probably.
I did sometimes bribe a nerd, to help
Nobody
me out.
bribed me. And now I feel like I got cheated
There's
for
still
real.
time.
For real. Anyways,
but
yeah, I created color changing stitches in high school, stitches that detect infections, and it was a part of a science fair project. That's what I wanted to do. My teacher came in one day. I was a junior in high school, so I started when I was 16, and she was like, I'm the science fair correspondent for our school. If you want to participate in the science fair, you let me know. Yeah. And so something about doing research and doing really nerding out. Something about it was really inspirational. I don't know, really fun to me. I don't know. It was just, it was really engaging. So I was the first person to raise my hand. I sat in the front row, so it was very noticeable. I think I was the only person to raise my hand in that class period. And push came to shove. We had a discussion. I was like, I want to do something in the medical field because I am a really big fan of Grey's Anatomy. Did I tell her that? 100%. And she was like, I don't really know how that's going to help you, but I approve, let's figure out what we're going to do. So she's still my girl to this day. Miss Walling, I love her.
That's awesome.
And so in a couple weeks we had developed this plan to launch into the science fair. That was the only goal, is to make it to the science fair. I didn't care what place I came in necessarily. I'm a Leo, so of course I wanted to win, but it wasn't a discussion about what place I wanted to be in. It was really, I was doing it for me and I was having fun while I was doing it. And so that spiraled into competing in one of the largest science competitions for high school seniors. And that is what led me to Ellen and all of the other things that I've done.
What did all of that attention do for you?
I'll tell you the first thing it did, it made me forget my entire senior year. I don't remember anything after January.
That's when it happened.
Yeah, so it started happening maybe, I got my first articles, my initial articles, January and February of my senior year. But the press frenzy really kicked in in March. There was a point where I was doing an interview a day, whether it was print, whether it was video. I was on Dr. Oz. I got to meet him. Yes, but
things didn't turn out. Not something to brag about as much now as it was
not at all.
then. But
still,
it was
a
huge.
thing.
Oh yeah, huge.
Right. It was a thing, and I was taking pre-interviews and stuff all on the bottom floor of my high school because I had the latter end of my day completely free. I didn't have any classes, so I would take that time to do more research and eventually do all of these interviews and stuff. So that's one thing it did, but it also really brought me to a wider audience of young kids who want to get into STEM, or young black kids who want to get into STEM, young queer kids who want to get into STEM. All of these kids were just looking up to me, and they really felt some type of way about my story. They really felt connected to me in a way. And so I'd use that as an opportunity to really speak my mind and say, what's what, and really just continue to inspire kids. And so that led to a really big celebration that I did for my 20th birthday, but I'm sure we'll get to that later.
Well, no, go ahead. What happened on your 20th?
So my 20th birthday, I launched this event called Dasia Day at the Iowa Children's Museum. It was the most epic event I've ever been a part of. I planned it in less than 4 weeks, and we had over 500 kids and their families show up in a span of 4 hours. It was insane. I called on some partners that I have in California that came out and did drone demonstrations. Every kid got to become a drone pilot that day.
The goal was to
inspire.
Inspire.
And to inspire while having fun, while learning.
Who did you target? Like age demographics?
Anybody.
Yeah.
Anybody
Young
could
people.
show up. Young people, period. Younger than me, even older than me. Some older kids showed up too. It was great. But just really to inspire anybody. But of course, like hosting it at a children's museum, we got kids from like preschool, kids that were still in diapers, all the way to kids who were in like 12th grade and seniors in high school about to graduate this year. So it was just really cool to be able to bring everybody together for an event like that based on notoriety that I received as a senior in high school. So it was really
That was
really
when
awesome.
this past?
That was this past August. So just about 6 weeks ago.
What happens as a result of that for you and for those young people? I mean, it must have sparked a lot of new opportunities, more importantly, new relationships.
Oh, new relationships for sure. Making sure that, I'm still building those bonds here in the Iowa City community, because I never want to forget the district that I came from and the kids that are a part of that district. We're all... It's a small, big town, I like to say. So I want to make sure that I'm reaching all of those kids. And beyond that, I want to take Dasia Day on the road. That's what really came of it.
Ooh.
So
you want to franchise Dasia Day?
Not necessarily,
But
not
you
like
want
monetized, because everything about this event was free. The admission was free. The kids in Coralville, they got bus passes from the city of Coralville to come down to the museum. Everything about it was free. So not monetizing Dasia Day, but like bringing it to different cities where they have children's museums and other places where we can inspire kids on the road. So,
do you have, as a result of all of these really amazing, impressive experiences at such a young age, do you have a concrete idea of where you want to go with your life and career, or are you still...
I have an idea for sure. I don't want to share it though, because I'm not trying to be held to anything. But I have a generalized idea of like where I want to go in the med tech space and where I want to go in the like science education space. So both of which I want to accomplish kind of both at the same time, like I've been doing. But I'm really excited for where that may take me.
That's amazing. That's awesome. That sounds really good. And I wouldn't hold you to it, but I'm happy that you have it. I mean, a lot of young people, I was just talking to Dave Gould, have no idea what they want to do, and that's very stressful to not know what you want to do. It's even more stressful sometimes to know what you want to do, pursue it, and then change your mind, which is also a really common thing that we should be forgiving and compassionate about. But 100%. The idea that you have some concrete ideas based on all this is unsurprising, and I'm sure you'll succeed no matter what you do. You seem really positive and happy and well-adjusted as a result of probably this life that you've lived and these accomplishments that you've had. Do you have struggles?
Yes. What human doesn't?
I don't know. We like to post on our social media what our life looks like, but I always say your internet history is who you really are.
Oh, that's valid.
What's in yours? Is there anything that you shop for? Get back to the question about the struggles. Like what has been, you said you're raised by a single mom, you're a black woman. I don't want to assume anything about your experience or how you identify other than what I can see and what you've said and what I've researched, but like how much of who you are, your identity is identified in any kind of struggle or adversity that you've had to overcome, or maybe it's an advantage in ways. I don't know. You seem so optimistic and hopeful and positive, but obviously it doesn't sound like it was easy. I mean, I don't know though.
No, life isn't necessarily easy, but I've had a lot of resources and I've learned to like finesse those resources to what I need. I wouldn't necessarily say take advantage, but like use, use those resources that are available that many people just don't know about. And I come from a single parent household, but my mother is not dumb. Like she's very smart, and she learned so many things at an early age that like I was able to also learn at an early age. And so just that compounding knowledge from generation to generation has been really helpful in all of my story. I mean, going back to just birth and on. So, I mean, a lot of my life is not easy, or, I've had some struggles, but it's nothing that I can't handle or know who to go to handle it. So,
are you still close to your mom?
For sure.
She's your rock, your talk on a regular basis.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I love her. I love her so much.
What is she like? I often think that parents get too much credit, and then I think they don't get enough credit. Yeah. And I don't know what what credit you would give your mom. You touched on it, but like I ask as a way for other parents listening to say, obviously they're not going to have the same experience that you and your mom had, but what is your mom, you touched on it, but what did your mom not do? Mm-hmm. Often it's inaction that allows you to take action. Mm-hmm. Like, is there any advice you have for parents to have their child turn out like you?
No advice for them to turn out like me per se. Again, no formula for me. Right. But my mom was like very active in everything that I did, actually, and encouraged everything that I did. So, well, for the most part, except for like when my grades were something, she'd be like, you can't do this activity anymore. But like at the end of the day, I really like thank her for that and like learning discipline in my different areas of life. But she encouraged everything. Like, if you want to go play basketball, you want to go play volleyball, do that. You want to do Black History Game Show, you want to lead the Black History Game Show, do that. You want to do science fair, do that. And she made a lot of sacrifices for me to be able to do those things. So there were a ton of times after science fair, I would stay every Friday after school during my junior year to complete the science fair project. And she would be at work, and then she would have to like take lunch later in the day to come pick me up and take me home and then go back to work. And so like, stuff like that, I really see as like perseverance and just dedication to what we were doing and the journey we've been on together. And I love her for that. I love her for everything.
What do you think about the way the world is, certainly the way America is, by the three metrics of where we're at on racial equality, gender equality, and LGBT equality? Mm-hmm. Because I think it's gotten a lot worse in the last few years especially. Mm-hmm. It depends on where you want to start and how you want to think, but like obviously actual rights have been lost. Mm-hmm. And yet you can make arguments that there's been a tremendous amount of progress for women in a lot of different spaces and workspaces and so on. And in certain parts of the country and in certain industries, obviously, there's been a lot more racial equity or opportunity. But how do you see it for your personal experience and for folks your age identify as in any of those lanes and what the future holds? Because it's pretty daunting and depressing to think about rights lost, mm-hmm. regression, and every day in the news, every mm-hmm. day, all day, there are people trying to make it harder to learn, mm-hmm. for example, Black history mm-hmm. or gender, anything, sexual health, any of these things. There are people actively preventing that, and not to mention voting rights and other things like that. How do you see America in 2023 along all of those categories that, and lanes that you identify in and experience every day?
We're not doing too hot. We're not doing too hot, and the future is very bleak. And it's really sad because we do have a growing number of people who identify as LGBTQ+, and you have like tons of people who want to get into all of these spaces, whether it be STEM, whether it be government, right? And there's so many barriers to how we can accomplish these things and what resources there are to accomplish these things. And if you think like just on a lower level too, just kids getting into college, like all of these things are just insanely difficult for people who identify as just one category, but like it seems like there are just barriers upon barriers upon barriers for people who identify with multiple.
Well, the intersectionality is like it only makes it harder if,
exactly,
as you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But someone might say, well, you've done pretty well.
I have done pretty well.
So that's the argument, right?
Yeah.
Well, Barack and Michelle Obama. Mm-hmm. And they'll name successful, in this case, we're talking about race.
Oh, I know.
The argument, Tim Scott does this, mm-hmm. most notoriously the black senator running for president of South mm-hmm. Carolina. Mm-hmm. We don't have this issue that a lot of people like to say because black folks look at and then they name names. And it's mm-hmm. Kind of the most insulting and ridiculous thing to do because mm-hmm. when we talk about any problem, we're talking about system-wide problems. We're not right. talking about the people who somehow gamed, beat, or did well and won. Those right. are aberrations, generally mm-hmm. speaking, when we're talking about this. That's my feeling. Yeah. Maybe you don't
No,
agree.
I 100% agree. People have had these conversations to my face before. So
they probably love to use you as an example. Have you met this woman, Dasia? She's doing amazing yeah. things. What are you telling me that black women aren't doing great? There's Dasia Day. Mm-hmm. Like, that's great. Mm-hmm. And I think they want to feel good about themselves yes. or not. I don't know. Why you tell me what you think that is?
Well, honestly, it's not my place to elaborate on what they think, but I just think having those conversations and being used in those type of conversations just pushes me further to the equitable goals that I have for the things that I want to push. So, STEM, equity, invention, education, all of that just gives me a big push to continue all of the equity work that I do with that. That's why Dasia Day was so important to me, because we removed a lot of economic barriers to being a part of that day. Everything was free. We contacted city officials to make sure that they had access to transportation, all of that. And so just making sure that we're putting in those equitable access points for people to call on and be a part of larger scale things. So they have access to different resources. They have access to all of these people. Just, a lot of things are like network as well, like access to a particular network and being able to know people. That's a really big part of how the game is played.
I appreciate your maturity and your candor in that you're saying things like, I don't want to speak for people. I don't want to,
It's not my job.
I understand that, but I'm going to ask you to do it a little bit in that when you see, I saw this billboard over here. I'm sure you've seen a giant picture, and it's on my phone, so I'm going to have to paraphrase it. But it's a picture, a painting of what looks like a black woman, and it says, use your privilege to
protect black bodies.
And I just never saw it put that way, so succinct on the side of a building. It was really wonderful. Mm-hmm. But when I saw that, I'm like, I said, am I doing that? And I go, yeah, I think I have been doing that. Sure. I do think I've tried very hard to be the change that I want to see, and I'm pretty proud of that. I can always do more each and every day. But do you have an opinion or advice for folks who do have a lot of privilege, older white folks, successful people, when it comes to making an effort to create more racial equity, racial justice, much less LGBTQ+. I mean, those of us that identify as a beautiful man, identify as a straight white guy who's had really a lot of opportunity that I've taken advantage of and done well. What do I do with that is the question I ask myself. What do you think that billboard is saying, that sign is saying, and more importantly, what do you think, if you do, because maybe you don't want to, tell us what we can do better or how we can do it? What does that mean?
Well, I'm not trying to be the voice of all black people or all queer people or anything like that.
Just your opinion.
But, I mean, in my opinion, because I know the history of that billboard that came at the time where George Floyd protests were happening in Iowa City. And so historically, that was kind of a context to what white people were doing in the community. And they were out here marching alongside all of the black people that were out here protesting for their lives. And so that's a really powerful statement that really, for people who have been here for a little while, know what was happening at that time and like the community that was being built at that time. Anyway, aside from that, I mean, one of the biggest parts is like investing in black businesses. Like I'm just talking for black people right here, but that's not necessarily monetary. It's support. It's showing up. It's being a part of the solution. Like I said, a lot of this is network building. Who do you know? And what can they do type thing. And so what you find is a lot of black people don't have access to that network. They don't have access to the people who make the decisions or know people who know who makes the decisions. You know what I'm saying? So network building is also really important, and removing barriers for black people, queer people, and communities to meet those people is really, really important. And I'm going to keep it at that because I think that's a really big thing that not everybody talks about. We can for sure talk about economic stuff, but we really need to be talking about networks.
Opening doors. Yes. And creating connections between actual people. Dasia, I want you to meet Mark.
Yes.
Dasia, I want you to meet, or then Dasia pays it forward to somebody else. That's what you're talking about. Because I think that that's a pretty natural, I think that in my 47-year-old experience, a lot of the white guys that I grew up with playing lacrosse, you get a job, and then you tell your buddy about an opportunity. And your buddy is probably in a similar category as you are. I mean, it's an old boys club in that case. And you don't realize what you think you're doing your buddy a favor. But what I learned years ago was once I had membership into a club, it was my job not to bring in more members like me. It was my job to actually find people. And I think sometimes people think that's virtuous or you're trying to. And I'm like, no, it's your responsibility to find people who aren't like you to open the door for, and then they'll do the same thing to somebody else. That's how I've seen or practiced what I think you're saying.
Yeah, I think you're right on the ball, but I think it's also to take a step forward and say this isn't just a chance for you to do that and then brag about what you've done.
Oh, that's the only reason I do it.
Yeah.
It's to come on the where's the camera? Folks. Right.
But I think like taking a step forward, because some people will be like, oh, I brought this one black person into this club. Look at me, go me. You know what I'm saying? And they don't like outright say those things, but it is like a give me a pat on the back.
Well, it's also like I've done my part.
Yeah.
Stop telling me, I've helped.
Yeah. So I've run into people who subscribe to that ideology. Mm-hmm. I also know people who do their best to really like work on making spaces equitable for everybody. And it's really interesting to see those two minds work together in the same community, and how, because we're a small, big town, how I would describe it. So like being able to identify, what's genuine, what's not, and just making sure that, nationally, we are taking that step forward to make sure we're not just looking for a pat on the back, but that this is a genuine connection. And I'm not saying, hey, you black person, like you should come with me to this like cool club thing and you should join and be a member. Like it has to be a genuine connection. We're not just going out looking for people, but we're actually making those connections to black business owners and being like, hey, I think this space would be really cool for you to enter into. Here are some friends that I know that could help you along the way.
Have you noticed the people who want desperately, with all the right intentions, to be helpful allies that do the wrong thing? Say the wrong thing?
Yes.
What would be an example that is helpful for us to know so that maybe we don't?
I think you'll know it when you hear it. I think you'll know when you hear it.
Right.
We live in a small, big town. I don't want to name names. So, but I absolutely do know that experience. I've experienced that directly. I've seen it play out indirectly. So yes, lots of experiences under my belt that I've seen or directly experience.
It's a perception that you have, though, that a lot of other people don't have. They don't even necessarily. You say you know it when you see it, but maybe we don't.
Sure.
Also,
sure.
I'm not sure that we always do. Hence, maybe continuing to make similar mistakes, say the same thing.
That is true.
With a good intention, not realizing how offensive it might be or how exclusionary it might be. Even.
Sure. That's true. That's very true. And the people that I've connected with that I've seen this play out before or I've directly experienced, I've gone and advocated for myself. And so like, hey, you can't say this. Like, you can't say this. You can't do this. This is how this may be perceived, or this is how it was perceived when you did it to me, and stuff like that. So I think it's really important for people in general to advocate for themselves. And I think this is a really, really big conversation.
But also there's a fine balance between advocating for yourself and not feeling the need to educate someone.
Yes, there is a fine balance, and it is a big juggling.
It's not your job to educate me.
Sure isn't.
It's my job to find ways to learn without it putting it on you. And I think I've done that, and people do that all the time. Like, I don't need to tell you who nominated me.
Right.
Go figure it out.
Right.
Like, that's not my responsibility to teach you about this black experience or that black experience, which, by the way, is not obviously always the same for people. So, but we do that. We do that a lot. Turns out.
Yeah.
What are you most scared of?
What am I most scared of? I am most scared of not succeeding. And more so
failure?
But like failure at my own expense, if that makes it. Like failure, I'm most afraid of not succeeding my own expectations, exceeding my own expectations. So failing
the threshold that you've created.
That I've created.
That's interesting because like you've had so much success. I don't know where your failures lie. I'm sure they exist, but yet you're conditioned to be concerned, or scared of whatever that might be. But I feel like given your nature and given your accomplishments, that whatever you consider a failure, other people might be like, damn, that was pretty impressive. And you're like, not for me.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that is what you're hearing. But I think there's also like some sort of like veil between people who know me directly and people who assume they know me because of what they've seen online.
Yeah, that's me. Like I prepped to meet you, so I'm that person.
So like, so success is really interesting because a lot of people will say I'm successful because of what they see online. And like all of the news, like being famous and having notoriety is success in some people's eyes. But beyond that, I have measures of success that go far beyond that. I was listening to a podcast the other day that I'm blanking on the name right now, but the person was talking about Hollywood and how she was a childhood actress and whatnot, and how she noticed that in Hollywood, that Hollywood breeds narcissism. And entitlement. And so from a very early point, like I'm a naturally humble person. I don't brag about the things that I've done. When I meet people for the first time, it is not the first thing out of my mouth that, I've been on Ellen and I've done all of these things. Who wants to hear that the first time you talk to a person? But beyond that, it's just like, that's very true. Like from an early age, I've just been very humble. And when I heard that the other day, I was like, this is why I kind of think and move the way that I do, because I don't want to feel entitled to something. Like I want to make sure that I'm earning it. I don't want success in my mind to be defined with fame and notoriety. I want to move beyond that and have measurable items.
There's I feel like, if this is what I'm hearing, a shorter way to say what you just said. Mm-hmm. It's the title of this great book by Ryan Halliday, who has updated Stoicism for a modern generation, and the title is Ego is the Enemy.
Yeah.
And you say, Hollywood breeds narcissism. You're talking about the entertainment industry makes you think you are something that you're not. You're better than you are because there's all these actual accomplishments and accolades that you may or may not, that you may get. And then you buy into that version of yourself, and then it can be destruction.
I'll give you a tangible example of what I do in my real life.
Go.
So I have a lot of awards. Like I win things that I didn't even know existed, whether they be like locally or like nationally or like just in a different region. And when I get home, I really acknowledge that experience and take it for what it was and like really bask in it for a little bit. But when I get home, and this is to like no offense of any organization that's ever given me an award, but when I get home, I put the award up. I put it in a box. I put it in a closet. And this also goes for like certificates and stuff like that. It's not because I'm not appreciative. It's because when I look at them every day, I think that they're a reminder of the work that I've already done and not necessarily of the work that I have to do.
Oh, Jesus.
And it's interesting to get, it's really interesting because a lot of people can get caught up in just what they've done. Look at these pretty awards of the things that I've done. And as time goes on, those numbers become outdated. 2020, 2021, that was years ago, right? And so like, what have you done in between that? Like what have you constantly put forward? How have you put your best foot forward in the work that you do? So that's also an element of that. And so I want to refrain from leaning too into the accomplishments that I have.
You're like 60. I have so much more to ask you and to talk to you about. Is there anything that you would want to share with this audience that we haven't touched on about, being you and you're, really trying hard not to speak for anybody other than you, and I appreciate that, but I am asking you to some extent too, certainly when it comes generationally, but anything else that you want to share, because this has been so great.
This has been really great. Nothing off the top of my head, but hey, we're taking Dasia Day on the road. So, I mean, if they have any suggestions of where we want to go,
get involved.
Yeah.
And if you want to host it, and if you have a children's museum, we'll put you in touch.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, and I appreciate her, and I hope you all do as well. Find out more about Dasia in the show links and support her and folks like her. Let me know if you know an amazing, impressive young person that I should talk to. I still haven't talked to a young man, and I think a couple of you have suggested and submitted them, and I need to maybe circle back. But I'd love to continue talking to young folks and featuring them here on the podcast, try to help them get some attention for the great things that they're doing, connect them perhaps with you. So there you go. Another episode of the Gen Z Zeries, and I'm so thankful and grateful to Mark Nolte, Every Out in Iowa City, for hosting me, and of course Dasia for talking with me. Thank you for listening to today's show. I hope to see you at tonight's hangout, which will be 9 p.m. because I've got to do an appearance in MSNBC, and I won't be getting back to the city from the city till about 8:30. So I'll see you at 9 p.m. tonight, and I look forward to talking to you in the hangout. Till then, love you. Goodbye. Be the change you want to see in the world. Feels real, real good when you can make it happen.
Keep right on ignoring us if it keeps in sight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See making sense, and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.